Okay, good evening, everybody. So today what we're going to do is we're going to cover the autonomic nervous system in our Dale Dubin book. So first we're going to start off by talking about the structure and a little bit of the function. So we'll talk about the basic structural unit of the nervous system, which is a neuron. And we have this all over the place within our body. It's going to have three major regions: the cell body, dendrites, and axons. And this is how our signals are going to be carried. So within the cell body, we're going to contain our nucleus, which is going to be receiving our nervous impulse. And then it's also going to transmit our impulses. We also have our dendrites, which will be receiving our nervous impulse and carries impulse away or towards the cell body. And finally, our axon is what's going to send impulses away from the cell body to other neurons or other organs. We're also going to find our axon terminals, which contain our neurotransmitters, which are going to be required for transmitting those signals. A brief overview of our neuron. You'll see that we have our nucleus in the middle of our cell body. At the far end, or towards the bottom left of your screen, those little finger-like objects are your axon terminals. And like we said just a second ago, that's where your neurotransmitters are going to be. On the axon, you're going to identify, you'll be able to notice that we have a myelinated sheath, which is going to help the transmission down the axon. Okay, that signal is going to be carried through that axon and transmitted through the nodes of Ranvier. So with our nervous system and our function, we're going to talk about a nerve impulse, which ultimately is just a signal of communication between the periphery and the brain. Right. In order for a signal to be sent through the body, it must start with a stimulus. That stimulus is then propagated down that axon terminal. That way it can be transmitted to the next cell in line. In order to create that stimulus, we need to make sure that we reach our resting membrane potential. So this is the difference in the electrical charges from outside and inside of the cell. The resting membrane potential is going to be at negative 70 millivolts, Okay. At this point, we are polarized, and this is seen with this uneven separation of ionic charges from outside and inside of the cell. Okay, so why negative 70 millivolts? Well, we have the high sodium outside of the cell, okay, and medium potassium inside of the cell. So the inside is more negative to the outside. All right. So what happens is our sodium channels are currently closed, and sodium is going to want to enter the cell, but it cannot without the electrical stimulus, without that stimulus. Okay. And then if those potassium channels open, potassium is going to actually leave the cell. That way it's going to be offset by sodium. Right? This is why we have our sodium-potassium pumps. So depolarization is going to occur when the inside of the cell becomes less negative or more positive, right? Because our resting membrane potential is at negative 70 millivolts, and then it's going to become less negative. So more sodium channels are going to open up, sodium is going to come in, and it's going to make the inside of the cell more positive or less negative, to be a little bit more truer. Hyperpolarization is going to occur when the inside of the cell becomes even more negative. So we're instead of negative 70, we're going to get closer to negative 90. That means more potassium channels are going to be open, more potassium leaves the cell, making us even more negative. When that occurs, it's going to become even more difficult for a stimulus to then start that depolarization, because instead of having to reach negative 70, we're having to get all the way down to negative 90. Okay. So we also have this idea of a refractory period. This is during depolarization when neurons are unable to respond to another stimulus. This is kind of a protective mechanism that we have set, because you don't want to fire when you're not ready, right? So you need to make sure you reach back down to that -70. That tells us that the cell is then ready to fire again and then depolarize, which we'll then see in a muscular contraction of the cardiac muscle. Okay. So sodium channels are already open. They're not going to open up any further. So that's what this refractory period is kind of referring to, is like, okay, we've already depolarized. Now we must reset. These channels are open. It's not going to change. When we talk about the nervous system, we talk about the basics as far as the brain and the spinal cord being the central nervous system, right? Then that signal goes back and forth to the periphery, okay? It goes through our sensory and motor nerves. And on our motor side, we are going to see our somatic and autonomic nervous system. When it comes to the area of the heart, we're going to be talking about our autonomic nervous system next. Specifically, we're going to talk about our sympathetic and our parasympathetic nervous system. And these are the two divisions of the autonomic nervous system. Okay. The parasympathetic, think of it as something that slows you down or inhibits. We have cholinergic receptors, and these are going to secrete acetylcholine, right, which is an inhibitory hormone for cardiac muscle. But on the contrary, neurotransmitter, not hormone. It's an excitatory neurotransmitter for skeletal muscle, but has the opposite effect with heart muscle, with cardiac muscle. And then on the sympathetic nervous system, we need to think about the sympathetic nervous system as something that will stimulate. And we're going to have androgenic receptors or beta-1 receptors, which are responsible for picking up the pace of things, so making things go a little bit faster. Okay, so what you're going to notice is the sympathetic nervous system is going to be responsible for secreting norepinephrine, which is an adrenaline-like neurotransmitter. So when we discuss the parasympathetic nervous system in a little bit more detail, we also call it the vagus nerve. And again, we said that it slows things down or inhibits. Specifically, its effect on the sinoatrial node, it will slow down or inhibit the sinoatrial node, which will then, because the sinoatrial node, or the SA node, is the dominant pacemaker of the heart, it's going to slow down the signals that are being sent from the heart. And those signals, if we remember, that get sent from the SA node start the wave of depolarization, which ultimately means it's going to start the contraction of the myocardium. Now, if that signal is slowed down, that means ultimately it's going to decrease our heart rate. What also happens, it's going to decrease the speed of the myocardial conduction. Right? So that signal is going to get spread through the myocardium a little bit slower. What will also happen is it's going to slow down the signal transmission through the AV node, With all this that's occurring with the parasympathetic nervous system and the decrease in heart rate, the decrease in speed of contraction through the myocardium, the decrease in speed through the AV node, it's ultimately going to diminish the force of contraction within the myocardium. The positive thing is, in individuals that have maybe certain types of arrhythmias or are a little bit more susceptible to arrhythmias or ectopy, as we like to call it, bad heartbeats, it will depress or slow down the irritability of certain cells that are the culprit of those initial arrhythmias or bad heartbeats. Now, when we go to the other side on the sympathetic nervous system, again, this is where we're going to speed things up. So the sympathetic nervous system is going to stimulate the SA node to pace faster. It's going to actually increase the speed at which the conduction goes through the AV node. It's going to increase the speed of conduction through the atrial and ventricular system. Okay. We will then see an increase in force of contraction of the myocardium. However, it will actually increase the irritability of some of these cells or foci within the atrium and the junction. And so that means we're at a little bit higher likelihood of seeing abnormal beats or ectopy beats that originate from the atrium and the junction. It has minimal effect on cells that live in the ventricles. So it will affect the atrial and junctional cells, but not so much the ventricular cells. Kind of a good thing. So when we talk about epinephrine, we're talking about things that specifically like adrenaline, this neurotransmitter adrenaline that's going to be secreted from the adrenal medulla. And this is an extremely potent stimulator that's going to increase your heart rate. So this is naturally produced during exercise, especially of high intensity. So if you're out there at the gym or running on a trail or doing a heavy workout in the weight room, and you are starting to work at a high intensity, heart rate's going to have to increase. Well, that's likely due to the secretion of epinephrine, which is going to stimulate that heart to start pumping a little bit stronger and a little bit faster. So when we talk about the hemodynamic flow within the system, the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system plays a very large role here. Within the sympathetic nervous system, we have to understand that this sympathetic response is going to cause an increase in heart rate. What'll also happen is it's going to play a role in the constriction of the arteries within the body. Okay. What'll happen is we're going to get some constriction to increase blood pressure, which is ultimately going to increase blood flow. And the reason this is important is, well, during times of exercise, we need to get more blood to the muscle in a lot faster pace. We're going to be using things like our neurotransmitters such as adrenaline, epinephrine to ensure that heart rate goes up, okay, and we're able to get more blood to that working muscle. From a negative standpoint, however, the sympathetic response can actually lead to chronic high blood pressure, which on the clinical side is kind of something we don't want to see because it ultimately will put more stress on an individual's heart, especially if it's a chronic disease for them. When we're looking at the parasympathetic nervous system, the job of the parasympathetic nervous system is going to actually dilate and open up those blood vessels. This will ultimately reduce blood flow and blood pressure due to this decrease in heart rate as well. Things to consider with the parasympathetic responses and hemodynamics is there could be a point where your vessels or your arteries dilate a little bit too much. If that's the case, what can happen is individuals can get lightheaded or dizzy. This becomes important, especially in the clinical population for individuals that already either have a low resting blood pressure, a low heart rate, okay, because they are more susceptible to these symptoms. These symptoms can lead to syncope, which is passing out. A lot of times individuals, especially heart patients that have had either heart attacks or have reduced function in their heart, are more susceptible to parasympathetic responses, not only because of exercise induced, but also medication induced. So it becomes very important to ensure that these types of individuals are monitored closely to ensure that their blood pressures are within stable ranges. And if they're not, then we need to make sure that we communicate with their doctor or are providing them and encouraging them, educating them and encouraging them to drink sufficient amount of fluids to maintain their stable hemodynamics and blood pressure. There are often times where we'll have these different types of responses that will occur for specific situations. One in particular is a vasovagal syncope. A vasovagal syncope is referring to an immediate response due to parasympathetic activation. So when we just discussed a second ago, the parasympathetic nervous system is responsible for dilation of arteries. Well, a vasovagal syncope will occur due to a very extreme parasympathetic response in which your heart rate will slow down dramatically. And because of this parasympathetic response, we get systemic dilation of arteries. The first symptom you're going to feel is dizziness due to hypotension. As these arteries dilate, pressure within the arterial system goes down significantly. You feel dizzy, you feel lightheaded, and ultimately gravity will take its course. You will go horizontal or pass out, which will have a loss of consciousness. And the reason that you do that is, hey, I don't like working against gravity, so it's better if I'm laying flat on the floor so I can get blood to get back to my brain. Okay. Orthostatic hypotension. This is actually very common in individuals that, again, have had heart problems or are taking medications. Also, individuals that are older at times get this too. It's also due to poor blood flow in the lower extremities or poor muscle pumps, so that blood's not going back to the brain at a sufficient pace. So what'll happen is you're going to get dizzy, or blood pressure, excuse me. Blood pressure is going to drop due to orthostatic reasons. And that orthostatic means a response to standing from a seated position. Hypotension means a drop in blood pressure. Well, that drop in blood pressure will lead to the dizziness. Okay. So the reason that we get this type of a response is we have these pressure receptors. They're called baroreceptors, and they're responsible for detecting hemodynamic changes within the blood. Okay. What will likely happen in a normal individual is if you stand up, that change in position causes a change in pressure. These baroreceptors will then identify that change in pressure. Okay. And when they identify that change in pressure, they will immediately elicit a sympathetic response to constrict those peripheral arteries, maintaining blood flow to the brain. So keep them nice and tight and constricted because it's identified, hey, there's a change, there's a shift in our hemodynamics. I need to make sure that we don't get dizzy because our blood pressure gets too low. So they constrict those peripheral arteries. Heart rate's going to go up a little bit, and then you're going to make sure that you don't fall over. Okay, the next thing that we'll talk about is a neurocardiogenic syncope. This happens often in older population, but it's due to prolonged standing. And ultimately what will happen is we get a pooling of blood in the lower extremities. Right? We're not getting a response from the lower leg muscles. There's no stimulation. We need some vasoconstriction to start getting that blood back up to the brain. That way we're not depriving the brain and then passing out. So what'll happen is we'll get a sympathetic response, again leading to the vasoconstriction. However, sometimes there's a paradoxical parasympathetic reflex, which will reduce that blood flow, which can lead to a syncope. Oftentimes, clinicians and doctors will assess this neurocardiogenic syncope syndrome by doing a head-up tilt test. Okay, and during this, what we'll see is this changes in pressure due to this change in position of the head. Okay, so as we start moving forward now, what we're going to be doing is we're going to start talking about calculating the heart rate. Then we're going to move into rhythm, axis, and hypertrophy. And when we start talking about some other parts of our class, we will then discuss infarction. All right, folks, thank you very much.